City building and park management games are some of the most satisfying. You get to design everything down to the smallest detail. In this video, we're going to talk about the best city builders and park builders out there right now. So grab a coffee or whatever fuels your city building addiction, and let's dive in. We gotta start with the titan of the genre, Civilization VII. This game is so iconic that I'm convinced Sid Meier has built a secret empire of his own with all the hours we've sunk into this series. If you've ever dreamed of controlling an entire civilization, managing resources, diplomacy, and military, this is where your fantasies come true. It's deep, it's expansive, and the best part? You never really finish a game. Every time you play, it's a different experience. It's a game that'll give you every high and low imaginable. You might even shed a tear when your perfectly planned cities are burned to the ground by a rogue nuclear strike. Fun times. Still, this is the game you go to if you want to lose yourself for hours and feel like an actual world leader. Pro tip, don't play it when you've got a deadline. Next up, let's get a little dark with Frostpunk 2. It's not just about building a city in this one. It's about keeping humanity alive in a frozen post-apocalyptic wasteland. So yeah, no pressure, right? This is one of those games that's as emotionally taxing as it is challenging. The city building mechanics are tight, but the real kicker is the moral dilemmas. You sacrifice a portion of your population to keep things running? Do you become a tyrant to ensure survival? I spent way too much time in my first run debating whether or not to give the workers longer hours. Felt like a real job, but with the added bonus of freezing to death if you get it wrong. Frostpunk 2 really makes you feel the weight of every decision, and it's one of those few games where being too nice can get you killed. So yeah, if you want to feel the emotional weight of running a dystopian society, this one's for you. Now let's talk about Farthest Frontier, one of the newer entries in the city building genre, but one that's been making waves for good reason. It's got that classic city builder feel, but with a much more grounded, rustic vibe. In Farthest Frontier, you're managing a settlement in the wilderness, trying to carve out a life and build a thriving community from scratch. You'll have to deal with everything from harsh winters to raiders trying to steal your hard-earned resources. The game also does an amazing job of making every decision feel significant. Every building you place, every resource you collect, every trade agreement you make, they'll all have a lasting impact on your settlement's future. And while it's easy to get frustrated when things go wrong, because they will, there's something really satisfying about seeing your little town grow into a prosperous, self-sustaining settlement after months of hard work. It's got that old school city builder charm, with just enough of a modern twist to make it feel fresh. Now let's talk about one of the most popular and most praised city builders of all time, City Skylines. This is the game you go to if you've ever wanted to feel the power of creating your own urban empire. From building neighborhoods to dealing with traffic jams, that feel like they could literally go on for eternity. This game has it all. But here's the kicker, it's deceptively deep. At first glance, it seems like a typical city simulator. But the more you dig into it, the more you realize how many different systems you need to manage. I can't tell you how many times I've thought, okay, I've got this city under control now, only for a random disaster to strike and throw everything into chaos. One minute, your city's economy is booming, and the next, your citizens are abandoning you because you didn't properly plan for waste management. But that's what makes City Skylines so addictive. It's the constant juggling of infrastructure, zoning, taxes, and the occasional random catastrophe. Oh, and don't even get me started on the mods. I spent far too many hours downloading mods just to make my city look perfect. If you want a city building game that gives you complete freedom to design your own dream metropolis, this is the one.
Threatened by populists and despots.
And now we turn to Tropico 6, where you get to play as a dictator, or El Presidente, on a small island nation, balancing the demands of your people with the pursuit of absolute power. I've always had a soft spot for Tropico, and the latest installment doesn't disappoint. The game is a perfect mix of city building and political strategy, with a hefty dose of humor thrown in for good measure. What I love about Tropico 6 is that it lets you live out your dream of ruling a small Caribbean island nation with an iron fist, or you can play it with a bit more flair, using bribery, propaganda, and an unyielding will to stay in power. The balance between political scheming and city building mechanics is what makes Tropico 6 so engaging. Running an island isn't all sunshine and beaches though. You gotta keep an eye on your economy, your citizens' needs, and you're standing on the global stage. Build too many mansions for yourself and the people might get angry. Try to make too much money and might find yourself under the scrutiny of the world's superpowers. But let's be real. The most fun comes when you start exploiting your resources and playing the political game to your advantage. If you're into games that offer both humor and challenge, Tropico 6 delivers in spades. If you're a fan of historical city building, Anno 1800 is where it's at. This one lets you build a thriving city during the Industrial Revolution, complete with trade routes, massive ships, and plenty of opportunities for expansion. The game's economy is complex, and the visuals, gorgeous. The first time I played, I was like, wow, okay, this is gonna be easy. 10 hours later, I was desperately trying to get enough steel to build a massive ship, all while dealing with angry citizens and pirates trying to sink my fleets. Anno 1800 is one of those games that looks pretty on the surface, but underneath, there's an ocean of systems you need to juggle. Once you get the hang of it, it's so satisfying to see your city running like a well-oiled machine. Or at least not completely falling apart.
Good morning, beautiful red planet. It's time.
Now, if you're tired of freezing on Earth and want to test your mettle on Mars, let's talk about surviving Mars. This one's all about building a colony on the red planet. And it's way harder than it sounds. You gotta deal with dust storms, freezing temperatures, and even the occasional malfunctioning dome that'll ruin your day. But honestly, I love it. The first time I played, I naively thought, hey, it's just a game about building a base on Mars, what could go wrong? A few hours in, I was watching my colony run out of oxygen and slowly suffocate in front of me. Fun stuff, but seriously, surviving Mars is a rewarding challenge if you love strategy and resource management. You're literally building humanity's future on another planet. Talk about some pressure. Alright, let's switch things up with Planet Zoo. If you've ever dreamed of running your own zoo, and who hasn't, this is the game for you. Forget the usual city building chaos. This time it's all about wildlife conservation, designing animal habitats and making sure your guests don't get trampled by a herd of stampeding elephants. Planet Zoo is packed with details, from the animal needs to the guest desires, and the design options are endless. But here's the catch. If you're not careful, you'll end up spending way too much time fixing that one habitat because the giraffes really don't like it. The game is both charming and challenging, and it scratches that creative itch if you love designing spaces. Plus, it's fun to see your zoo grow. Factorio is what happens when you take the phrase work smarter not harder and crank it up to the max. The entire game is about building a factory so efficient it practically runs itself. Sounds boring? Trust me, it's weirdly satisfying. The first time you automate something, you feel like a genius. The 20th time, you'll wonder how you became so obsessed with conveyor belts. Just watch out for the alien bugs. They're not fans of industrialization. I know people who have over 2,000 hours in this game, which goes to show how addictive it can be. I haven't picked it up myself, but let me know your thoughts in the comments if you have.
Around here, the commodity is dinosaurs.
If you ever dreamed of building your own dinosaur park without the risk of being eaten alive by a T-Rex, Jurassic World Evolution 2 is here to make those dreams come true. Now, I'll admit, I went into this game expecting to see a fun park builder experience, but what I didn't expect was the level of detail that Frontier put into managing a park with actual dinosaurs. It's got all the usual city building mechanics, staff, resources, infrastructure, but with that added bonus of literal dinosaurs. As much as I love watching my T-Rex rip through the fences and cause chaos in my carefully crafted park, there's a surprising amount of strategy here. You gotta manage your park's safety, maintain visitor satisfaction, and make sure your dinosaurs don't go rogue and turn your dream park into a nightmare. And trust me, they will go rogue, whether it's due to poor enclosure design or the occasional breakout. You'll find yourself running from one emergency to the next. When you're not managing research, finances, or the surprisingly detailed genetic system for your dinosaurs, the game's campaign mode offers a variety of challenges, and the sandbox mode lets you create your ideal park. No constant dino escapes, hopefully. And don't even get me started on the amount of customization, from the appearance of your dinosaurs to the layout of your park. you have a ridiculous amount of freedom, which is exactly what a game like this needs. Sure, the glitches in animation can sometimes make your raptors look like they're floating around, but it's all part of the experience, right? Alright, we're leaving dinosaurs behind and heading into Planet Coaster, a game that, if you haven't played yet, is essentially Roller Coaster Tycoon on steroids. Seriously, the level of detail and creativity that this game allows is incredible. Whether you're building the wackiest roller coaster known to man or designing an entire park from scratch, Planet Coaster gives you all the tools you need to make something amazing. As someone who's been obsessed with roller coaster simulations since the days of Roller Coaster Tycoon, I was blown away by how much freedom Planet Coaster gives you. Want to design the craziest roller coaster that twists, loops, and defies gravity? Go ahead. Want to design your park to be an absolute nightmare with rides so intense your guests will probably have heart attacks? It's possible. This game takes create your dream theme park to a whole new level. Every ride, every little piece of decoration, and every visual element can be customized. It's not just about building the rides, it's about creating an atmosphere, whether you want a creepy Halloween theme or an over-the-top futuristic park. You've got all the tools you need to pull it off. And the best part? Watching your guests react to your creations is oddly satisfying. Sure, they might be terrified of your towering roller coaster, but they'll queue up for it anyway. They have no choice, right? Moving on to Banished, a much smaller but incredibly rewarding city building experience. This one is set in a medieval world, and instead of focusing on grand skyscrapers and modern tech, you're managing a tiny village trying to survive. Think farming simulator, but with a lot more pressure to avoid starvation and disease. I'm not gonna lie, I've played Banished for hours, only to watch my entire village collapse into chaos because I failed to balance food production and population growth. It's one of those games where you'll spend hours building a beautiful village, only for your citizens to starve to death because you didn't stockpile enough food for the winter. Yeah, it's that brutal. What I love about Banished is how it keeps you on your toes. You can't just build everything and expect it to run smoothly. It's all about balancing resources and keeping your citizens happy enough to keep them from rebelling. There's also a certain level of satisfaction in seeing your little settlement grow from a handful of people to a bustling village, if you don't let them freeze to death first. One of the coolest parts of Banished is how the game forces you to be resourceful. It's not about flashy graphics or complex mechanics, it's about survival, and that raw challenge is what makes it so addictive. You'll find yourself constantly tweaking your strategies, adjusting your village layout, and constantly learning new ways to avoid disaster. And trust me, you'll need to. Manor Lords is an early access city builder set in the medieval era, focusing on creating realistic and sprawling medieval settlements. Unlike traditional city builders, Manor Lords emphasizes realism, where players must manage resources, labor, and military strategies to grow and defend their territories. The game features both the grand strategy aspect with politics and diplomacy, and a more personal touch as you cultivate your lands, build farms, and establish trade routes. Manor Lords is so realistic, I spent 30 minutes arguing whether I should grow turnips or barley. Turns out medieval life is basically deciding if you'll have bread or porridge for the next 10 years.
To survive.
Next up is Rimworld, and oh boy, where do I even begin with this one? It's not your typical city building game, but it definitely falls into the category of build something that isn't a complete disaster. In Rimworld, you're tasked with building a colony on a distant planet, but it's not as simple as just laying down some roads and constructing buildings. You've got to manage the mental health of your colonists, deal with random events, and try to survive in a hostile world. Now, Rimworld is known for being one of the most brutal city builders out there, and for good reason. Things can go wrong really quickly. One minute you're building a nice little colony, and the next, an angry raid of space bandits show up. Your food supply is contaminated, and your best doctor is incapacitated. The game doesn't hold your hand, and honestly, that's part of what makes it so thrilling. What's great about Rimworld is that every playthrough feels completely unique. The game's AI storyteller controls the events that happen to your colony, so no two games are ever the same. You could have a peaceful run one time and be hit with a constant string of disasters in the next. And the beauty of it is that no matter how much you plan, you can't predict what's going to happen. You're constantly reacting to the chaos around you, but that's what makes Rimworld so rewarding. There's something deeply satisfying about getting your colony back on track after a string of misfortunes. And when your colonists finally start thriving, there's a real sense of accomplishment. The only problem is, when things inevitably go wrong, you'll wonder why you ever thought this was a good idea in the first place. But hey, that's Rimworld for you. Finally, we get to Dwarf Fortress. If you've never played it, you're in for one of the most complex and absurd city building experiences ever created. Dwarf Fortress isn't just a city builder. It's a simulation of everything, from your dwarves' personal lives to the brutal realities of underground fortress building. Now let's be clear, Dwarf Fortress isn't for the faint of heart. But if you can get past the learning curve and the ASCII graphics, you'll find yourself hooked by one of the most detailed and immersive simulations ever made. You start with a small group of dwarves, dig deep into the earth, and start building your underground fortress. But it's not just about building structures, it's about managing your dwarves' emotions, keeping them fed, dealing with monster invasions, and handling the various disasters that can strike at any moment. The story that emerges from the chaos are some of the best you'll experience in games, and the challenge of keeping your dwarves alive in such a hostile world is surprisingly rewarding. And if you're the type of player who loves depth, complexity, and the thrill of watching things fall apart in real time, Dwarf Fortress is for you. Whether you're into dinosaur-filled chaos, political dictatorship, and dwarven disasters, each game offers its own unique brand of city-building goodness. Hit that subscribe button and check out our next video, the 15 best RPG games you can play right now. See you there.